If you sit down at your desk ready to compose and face 23 different harmonic progressions you must choose from, and find yourself doing more research or calculating future royalties or even figuring out who you should thank in your Grammy acceptance speech, this video is for you. By the end of this, you'll understand what is happening is a much deeper neurological response rather than just discipline and willpower. Why this is worse for composers, how this shows up in the daily life of a composer, and a two-step actionable framework that helped me start creating freely again. That's called a hook, by the way. Now that you're hooked, let's get into this. Have you ever stood in the cereal aisle for 20 minutes not being able to decide between Fruit Loops or Apple Jacks? Or have been paralyzed trying to pick a show to watch with your dinner as your food gets cold? The reason why I don't have a website at the time of recording this video is because, no joke, I couldn't decide on the fonts. I should really get onto that. You're genuinely lucky you're seeing this video. I couldn't decide what to write about for the longest time. These instances are annoying and perhaps ultimately harmless. They are examples of situational indecision. But when they have been showing up in every aspect of your life since as long as you can remember, that's a stable, chronic indecisiveness. As you might know by now, when you enter a composition session, you bring all of yourself in it, all your flaws and all your merits, so naturally you will bring indecisiveness along with you in your creative practice. What that does is you spend more time thinking about the work than doing it. You spend ridiculous amount of time on researching about the same composition problem without moving the needle at all. You know what you want to make, but you can't seem to start making it. And when it is time to commit to a decision, you leave that section, you go to the next one, and promise yourself you'll come back to it. So what's going on? Beats me. As with a lot of other psychological constructs, there are commonalities and differences from individual to individual. The specific trigger that brings about indecisiveness in person could be unique, but the core mechanism is consistent enough to call it a pattern. At the core of most chronic indecisiveness is disproportionate sensitivity to uncertainty. Every decision we make has unknowable outcomes. Decisive individuals commit to the decision despite the unknowable outcomes. Indecisive individuals like us, who probably have low tolerance to ambiguity or high neuroticism, perceive unknowable outcomes as a form of threat. Our brain's threat avoidance system, which is fight, flight, freeze, avoid system, responds to the threat by blocking forward movement. It is by all means a nervous system response rather than a cognitive deficit. There are two main reasons why this is worse for composers. Composers engage in something called divergent thinking, which is the ability to think in multiple directions simultaneously. So the same trait that allows us to be generative also multiplies the number of outcomes we need to assess. It's like playing chess with yourself with 20 reasonable moves with no clear advantage. You'd never get anything done. The second reason is that every decision we make as composers, like which direction to take an idea, how much to develop it, when to call something finished, all of that gets heard and is publicized, and it is permanently associated with our creative identity. That level of permanence raises the stake and it fires the threat response even harder. This is how we respond to that. Once our brain's threat avoidance system is activated, we disguise the avoidance of decision making as information gathering. We convince ourselves that we need to be more thorough and get additional clarity. However, by postponing the moment of commitment, by chasing more data points, adds cognitive load and paradoxically takes away from the decisional clarity. I mean, seriously, what would your brain rather have you believe? That you got overwhelmed by the number of options that were available to you and you were afraid of the repercussions of the decision you make, so you chickened out, or that you needed to do more research so that you can make a much more informed decision, because you're such an intellectual king, my guy. It sucks because sometimes you actually do need to do more research, and then you find out that, oh, my brain does this to me, so I don't know if I actually need more information or not. Yeah. It's paranoia. My personal favorite way to be indecisive is over strategizing. If I am composing the primary sketch of the first movement of a Basurian orchestra piece, Basuri is the Indian bamboo flute. If I'm doing that, my brain would be like, oh, you know what I should do? I should record the Basuri separate from the orchestra at the same time but in different rooms, so that I can export a separate track that we can use for pedagogical purposes, because most of the Basuri players are orally trained. So what we can do is we can create a reference track and they will be able to learn from that. It's a wonderful idea. It's just a couple years too early. And I'm constantly bombarded with such ideas all the time, and it is more of a curse than it is a blessing, because I'd rather think about something that's happening right now than to think about something which is situated in a galaxy far, far away. Of course, understanding the mechanism and marveling at it won't dissolve anything, so this is what we'll do about it. We will approach this as I would approach any creative hindrance, in two layers. One is at the cognitive level and the other as at an actionable layer. First, at the cognitive level, we will identify any inherited internalized rules that we are operating under that we have not consciously chosen, which is creating this hindrance. In this case, it is, I am an indecisive person. We could keep understanding the rule further by asking why. Luckily, in this case, we don't have to go far because the mechanism we discussed is actually what's causing this. I am an indecisive person is essentially, I am disproportionately sensitive to uncertainty. That's the layer with enough meat on it so we can do something about it. Once we have identified and understood the rule, we have two options. We can either consciously choose it or release it. I am sure that you are inclined towards releasing this bastard of a rule. So we'll do so by reframing the rule as a permission that we can give to ourselves. It would look something like this. I need to give myself permission to appreciate and enjoy the emergent nature of creative decisions. The reason behind this permission is to see uncertainty as a positive adventure and experimentation, rather than seeing it as a form of threat that in turn activates the brain's fight, flight, freeze, avoid system. That's a mouthful. This also addresses the avoidance impulse, by the way. When uncertainty feels like a safe place rather than a threat, the brain stops needing to dress up avoidance as diligence. The success of you giving yourself this permission depends on whether your fear of uncertainty resides in the accessible psychological realm. If it is too deep rooted, which would likely be the norm, then we must follow it with an actionable layer. The goal of the actionable layer is also the same, not letting the brain activate the fight, flight, freeze, avoid system. I nail that every time. Something that worked for me was breaking big projects into minute, small, manageable actions and arranging them in a hierarchical order. What I would aim for is just getting to that singular thing, the singular most important thing that will move the needle, and everything else is noise. Obviously, breaking a project into singular next decisions also reduces the numbers of outcomes your brain has to assess simultaneously. The threat sensitivity fires at a much lower level because each decision feels much smaller and manageable rather than existential. And when you reduce the decision to its smallest possible form, the information gathering impulse has also less to feed on. And needless to mention, this also stops you from prancing off to an imaginary galaxy. Something else which is highly relevant, I won't go in a lot of depth here, but is the Parkinson's law. which states that the work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. Essentially, a task will take as much time as you give it. So, in addition to breaking down big projects into small, manageable actions, you would also need to figure out how to incorporate very tight external deadlines that has outside accountability. I find for myself that it is much more efficient when the deadline is external rather than a self-imposed one. When both of these layers, the cognitive one and actionable layer, work together, something shifts. You spend more time doing the work than thinking it. You research about what's currently needed and then move on. You know what you want to make and you just start making it. And when it is time to commit to a decision, you actually make it move forward and rarely look back. If this resonated, I work with a handful of serious composers on exactly this. There's a link in my bio to book a conversation. Check it out.
Welcome to my YouTube channel.